Schools are starting to track kids using their own smartphones.
We break down how this works and whether or not you should be concerned. Stick around for your daily charge.
Good morning. Welcome to Daily Charge. It's Tuesday, February 25th. I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Alfred Ng.
And here are today's headlines. At least 10 schools across the U.S. have rolled out a system that tracks and potentially surveils students using the signals from their phones. Alfred, how does this work?
All right. So you ever been to a mall and they
I hate
have
malls. No.
No. Okay. So you've never been to a mall. So there's these things called radio frequency scanners that pick up signals on your phones that are things like your Bluetooth signal, your Wi-Fi signal, in some cases like your cell frequency signal, and it uses that as a location tracker instead, right? So
the idea that these phones are constantly pinging the network for a connection, and it's that ping they're tracking and using to locate you.
So they're able to do that and say like, okay, there's a phone here, there's a phone here, and unless these phones have somehow gained sentience and are walking on their own, they're most likely attached with a person. So they're using that to they use that to track people in malls to say like, oh, there's this many people at this store today. We know like how well traffic does. That's kind of what like marketers use that data, right?
Sure.
They also use this in prisons to basically detect any kind of contraband because inmates aren't allowed to have cell phones or anything like that.
Right.
So they're now bringing this into schools where they're using that to track students throughout their day, and it's not just their phones, right? Like, so if it has any kind of signal, so like your kid has like a new pair of AirPods or anything like that, that's being tracked. And obviously there are some kids that are too young to have phones.
Right.
So this company in Piction decides, hey, we are going to introduce wristband trackers for them, where it basically kind of works like a Fitbit, where they use that to also track like their steps and their calorie count, and their heartbeat. Which this is pitched as something to be a school safety thing.
Right. So I mean, I think that's why a lot of schools might be inclined to look at this. Right. The idea that the promise here is that it's supposed to be a safety issue. It's supposed to prevent school shootings, but we've talked about this. You've talked about this before. Like, that's not necessarily the case, right?
No, absolutely not. I mean, so the way that it's supposed to work as a school safety tool is say, they have every kid's like phone registered already. So if a new device comes on campus and it's like, hey, we don't know like whose phone that is, what's going on here, they send a security guard to go check it out.
Right.
The problem with an idea like that is, kids get new devices all the time.
Sure.
And it's not like, what if they get a new pair of headphones that are not registered? Then it becomes like sending a security guard every day for something like that.
And also, I mean, for a lot of the school shootings, they're done by students who would be
registered,
right? So they wouldn't actually be flagged.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, that's the problem with a lot of the technology being proposed as school shooting prevention, where there's absolutely no proof that this technology works. But obviously,
with that said, though, I mean, I get that it's a very specious argument, the preventing school shootings, but in terms of preventing, I guess, unwanted people, strangers, like adults who mean to do harm, like this system would actually trigger like would alert security that like these folks
but why would you? Okay, so try convincing a school board to spend $1.4 million on something like this to prevent just a guy that you don't want on campus, like an annoying person, or try convincing them saying you can use $1.4 million to
stop shooting.
Stop shootings.
Yes.
Like they use that logic a lot because like fear is what sells.
So that's a really good point though. Are schools really doing this? Are they using the school shooting thing as a reason, as the impetus to actually get the money, but they're really actually using it to like track kids?
I mean, I don't see schools making this pitch that much so much as I see
these
companies making this pitch to get schools to spend money on them. And I think the onus is really on them, right, to prove that this technology works, because like ultimately schools are spending this money and I don't know how well funded the school districts are in your area, but across the country, it really is like they're kind of starved for resources.
Absolutely.
And you could be using that money to pay teachers more. You could be using that money to pay for more guidance counselors or after school programs that would, actually help out the kids rather than these security systems that, might be helpful one day, but like the rest of the time it's there.
It's fascinating debate because I have two kids. I'm not averse to putting trackers on my kids, frankly, which I know you think is a privacy issue. But the key difference here between what this is and what I'm thinking about is like, this would be a tracker that I would put on my kid that I would have control over, right? That would be cellular.
Yeah, you could sell that data on your kids.
Exactly, exactly. If Google wants it, I'll if they give me enough money, I'll do it. But the fact that it's a school doing it and it's only limited to school is, and it's an opt-out program. Like,
Yeah, you have to
can't-
tell them, please don't track my kids.
right.
rather
And
than-
also, if parents do opt out, doesn't it make the system kind of irrelevant?
Well, not only that, but it's also like, even if you opt out, you are still being tracked in a way, right? Like if I'm not in school one day because I opted out of being in class and they have the attendance sheet and they say, oh, Alfred wasn't here today. I mean, like, they have that data still.
Right,
like,
right.
Omission of data is still like data that's collected.
That is a fair point. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing because, like, I think there is a line, like, parents, from our perspective, we are definitely willing to bend privacy rules when it comes to keeping our kids safe, right? That's ultimately the priority. So, but how it's done is the execution is really the key. And, like, I don't know.
Like I said, I mean, like,
I don't know if,
think-
like, letting the school handle it is the best thing.
I think a lot of it comes down to like a heat of the moment kind of thing, right?
Right.
Where it's like, if there's a fire in a building, like, you wouldn't care about like privacy issues
Yes.
there.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like, I guess the question is like, how often is a building on fire? And like, would you want to have your privacy invaded the rest of the time so that it would save you in that situation?
It's an interesting debate because with school shootings and the frequency of school shootings, and we can take off the table the fact that maybe this thing isn't super effective one, but in the terms of the argument, like, if you made the argument that this prevents one school shooting, I think for most parents that would be enough.
Oh, well,
to
yeah,
take away their
yeah. I
privacy,
mean, obviously,
right?
one school
That's-
shooting,
I think
like,
that's
more than
and I think that's why the argument is so compelling, even though it may not be as effective as these companies claim, right?
I mean, yeah, that's the idea, right? They say, you're trading off your privacy for safety.
Right.
But if you're not actually getting the safety that they're promising, are you actually trading anything off?
Right. All right. Also today, Firefox just announced that it's putting in place something called DNS over HTTPS, a protocol that's supposed to make your browsing experience a lot more private. Technology prevents other people from tracking you when you type in an address for, say, CNET.com. Firefox and its creator, Mozilla, has long been a champion of privacy, although folks are still using the Chrome browser. Alfred, what do you think?
Let me just preface this by saying that the Chrome browser also does this, but you have to turn it on by settings.
Yes.
And if you've watched this show before, you understand how frustrated I get about default settings.
Yes.
But I kind of want to just break down what DNS
Sure.
over HTTPS is, just because it's like a lot of
It's a lot.
alphabet soup
It's
here.
a lot of letters.
Yeah.
Yep.
So DNS, think of that as like a phone book, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the way the internet works is that like you type in a URL and you go somewhere, right? But the URL is not what like is actually going on behind the scenes. You're going to like the IP address, but you're more likely to remember CNET.com over like 10.1.82 whatever.
Yep.
It's the same way like you don't remember everyone's phone number, but you have their contacts like listed there. So that has been like how the internet has worked for like decades, and that has been sending over HTTP for a long time, for a really long time, which is not good because that's not encrypted, and like your ISP, another acronym, I'm sorry, your internet provider can like use that data and say, oh, this person goes on CNET a lot. Let's put like tech advertisements for this person.
Yep.
So once it's encrypted, then it becomes kind of a way to say like, hey, you can't like look at this data anymore. And the thing that Mozilla is doing is a very big deal, that they're making a default option where you don't have to do anything, which is how things should be.
Right. Well, look, Google, which owns the Chrome browser, makes a lot of money on advertising. So like taking that feature away, or taking that ability to peer into what that traffic looks like, it's not great for his business.
So DNS-based ads are a lot more for internet service providers than they are for like your browser.
Right.
Because like if you search stuff by HTTPS, that's also encrypted. So Google has a lot more ways of targeting your ads, like rather than using that kind of security. I don't know why they haven't made it by default. They absolutely should. I just don't know how much of their money like actually comes from that.
Gotcha. Okay. So I assume there are a lot of questions about today's topics. Let's keep weighing the pros and cons of school surveillance and ask ourselves, where is the line for privacy when it comes to kids? Also, want to know more about Mozilla's DOH impact on your browsing habits? Fire off your questions and we'll try to get to as many as we can before we're out of time. And while you're at it, why don't you subscribe and ring the bell so you can join us for all the live shows. In the meantime, what do we got, BBG?
That was dense, guys. That was a really dense conversation. I feel like a lot of that soared over my head, but I do appreciate all of Alfred's analogies and comparisons. You got a bit of a talent for that, Alfred.
I mean, I think the phone book analogy has been used for like a long time now. That's not from me.
Fair enough.
I wish I was that cool and smart, but
Just take credit for it. It's cool, man. It's cool.
reportedly a phone book.
So I want to backpedal real quick to the surveillance story. I wanted to ask, where have we seen this kind of technology implemented already? Where can you find it out in the wild right now?
Malls, prisons. Yeah.
But as far as like a prison is a very different story because that's a restrictive environment. I don't really know what the language I want to use to describe that is. But something like a mall that's a public area, you know, what sanctions are, what concerns have people brought up about this? And how the hell are they trying to justify it in a school when a mall is already a shaky spot?
So the way they do it with a mall is it's kind of like they haven't made this justification for schools, but I imagine if somebody confronted them about it, they would kind of say
and for malls, do they say like it's anonymized technically?
They also say it's anonymized for schools, but here's like the part where that's not true. You can combine that data with video footage to basically say, you know, okay, so this person was in this room with like 50 other people and all these devices, and we have the log of all those devices there. Then you just watch the security footage to like backtrack like where this person had been, like from the moment they come into the mall, and say, okay, well, there was only one device, and then it matches with like the device that we logged in the room with 50 people. And voila, you have essentially de-anonymized that data. Most of the times when data is anonymized, it really only takes like 4 or 5 steps to figure out like who it actually is.
And how, practically speaking, like how long would it take for someone to figure it out based on like using surveillance data plus?
Pretty quickly. Like they did a demo video of it. The company did a demo video of it for their mall purposes, which I guess they didn't think I'd find that when they told me it was all anonymized.
Was that a private video?
No, it was like on their website. You know, reporters doing their jobs. Who figured?
Yeah. All right.
But yeah, you can de-anonymize that like pretty quickly. And obviously it was a demo, so it might be like a different amount of time, but like they clearly have the capabilities to do it.
Okay.
Next question. Well, this is really more of a comment from our friend Eric in YouTube. I just thought this was kind of sad, but really funny. Is this kind of like depressing Disney magic bands?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When I brought this story up to one of our video producers, he was saying, oh, yeah, they did that for like my kids at like Disneyland or something, or some cruise.
Magic bands or something?
Yeah, but I think the difference is, you know, kids are not going to Disneyland every day. Like, kids are going to school every day, and they're subjected to this every day. I'm pretty sure kids would not mind it if they got to go to Disneyland every day and like put this on there, but...
Talking about sacrificing privacy for something you get, that's, yes.
I'm saying kids would not mind that.
No, I'm saying, yes, they would totally give that up. Like, oh, yeah, I'll be tracked. Just take me to Disneyland.
Yeah, like, it's not like a crime if your kid doesn't go to Disneyland for 30 days. Like, you will actually go to jail for that if that happens. Like, for school, I mean.
Right.
Brian's got a really great comment. He says, it sounds as if the new tracking tech can track cell phones without carrier help, and that is scary. A random company can track people without their knowledge or permission. Is that exactly the case, Alfred? Are they truly circumventing the carriers on this?
Yeah, you don't need the carriers to get the Bluetooth signal.
Keep in mind, though, that this only works where they have their infrastructure. It's not like they can track you everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, once you leave the school, the tracking no longer works. It's still kind of creepy and scary within the confines of the school, but it's not like they can track you everywhere.
Yeah. And like some schools have seen benefits of this. So this is not a school that had Impiction's technology, but this is a school that had similar technology with their Wi-Fi to like track students when they log into their Wi-Fi. So like last summer, this was around like June or July, something, probably June, because it was like a senior prank that was just a hate crime. This was in Maryland. This was a high school in Maryland where these 4 kids did their senior prank where they spray painted a bunch of racial slurs on the school. Very funny. But they got caught because when they were on campus, like their phones automatically connected to the school Wi-Fi. They had all these masks on and stuff, and they kind of avoided surveillance footage, but it was kind of just like, you connected at this time. So like obviously, but like, again, not a school shooting, like not like to the same degree of like danger or anything like that. But like schools do see benefits of it.
Here's an interesting perspective that I initially did not think about when we were bringing this up. Kashif says, I could see this being useful for suicidal students, emotionally disturbed students, or students with developmental disabilities. Is that a considered application that we could see this being beneficial to? Essentially, just helping keep a closer eye on somebody who might need a closer eye.
I
really,
would
right?
heavily disagree with that. So I don't really know how knowing somebody's location in a school building would like help figure out like if they're suicidal or mentally ill or anything.
I think
like
what they're trying to say is if the student was already documented as troubled, if that perhaps they were on a, let's call it what it is, a suicide watch, if they could keep tabs on that kid,
Okay,
it's a very,
all right,
it's a
hold
very
on.
tricky line.
Okay. So there's a tool called Social Sentinel that many schools use. It monitors public posts on like all their social media feeds, except for like Snapchat, because those aren't public posts. There are multiple stories on how often they get it wrong because they don't understand when kids are just joking around, right? So they'll like make a post like, if Taylor Swift doesn't win the Grammy tonight, I'm going to like shoot myself, something like that, right? And these algorithms have gotten it completely wrong the entire time because they can't like pick.
Well, could you make the argument that, especially for someone who's suicidal, like if the kid disappears from school, then that's a red flag?
Okay, why would you need tracking tech for that? They take attendance like every day on that. Are the teachers like accidentally marking them there?
Well, I
Like,
don't look.
why would you need to know like
This is a good
if the kid's device
conversation.
whereabouts? Like the teachers are already like marking attendance during the day.
I don't know. Like if maybe it goes down to the inaction of teachers. Like if they're marking down that the person's out, I don't know if they're the ones flagging the school for whether or not the person's
the thing
missing.
is like if the teachers are that incompetent, like no amount of technology is really gonna save you from that.
Very
And
true.
the other thing about like location tracking and like being able to infer stuff about students, that's a terrible thing to do. Like talk to the kids. Like you really need to know, like with technology like this, a lot of it is like you can see like how long somebody's at like the guidance counselor's office for. You can see
that's true.
how many trips to the bathroom during the day they make, or like how long they're at the nurse's office for. Why would it like schools like don't need to know that kind of information. It's invasive and it does not like provide the actual like help that a person being there would actually be able to provide.
I don't know. I just know that when I was in high school and junior high, I definitely found ways to get out of school without teachers knowing, whether it's notes. I had notes excusing absences.
Oh, it was
and
an
I
art,
can
Roger.
and I can disappear. I could have disappeared for like an hour.
But like it marked your absence though, right?
No, like
they
I could just give them a note saying, "Hey, I'm on some other part of the campus doing some school project, but I'm not."
Well, that's the thing I do want us to
So
talk
that's the thing.
about.
Like, there are instances where you can disappear from school, and because of just the bureaucracy and the fact that there are multiple classes, multiple teachers, that they may not know.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. Like, I'm not necessarily arguing for the system, but I will say, if they turned around and said, "Hey, we can share that data with parents," I would be willing to bet that some parents would be into observing whether or not their kids are
I
actually in
would
school.
not want my parents knowing like how long like I've spent at the guidance counselor's office for.
That's
like
fair.
that's not.
But
like,
what if it was just like red or black, whether or not you're in school or you're out of school?
I mean, like a lot of schools already do that. My school would call the house, like they had a bot call the house if I wasn't like in school, like during the day.
All right. But again, that only works if the school knows you're not at school.
Yeah, I mean, I had attendance marked in like every class. Like it wasn't like
I know. All I know is there are definitely ways
Yes,
to get
yeah.
around that, right? If you're smart enough, if you can probably figure out how to get out of class without the teacher knowing that you're out of class,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying. If you're smart enough to do that, I'm sure there are parents of those smart kids who would be willing to
like-
take that data.
like there would be kids that like immediately after they marked attendance, like I like you would leave.
Right.
Which like definitely happened. But I think if you were missing for the next class, like obviously like teachers like notice that, and I think that they're the ones that should be the ones telling parents this rather than. The idea is like if you're saying that like kids are smart enough to trick like teachers, like what makes you think they won't be smart enough to trick like the technology here?
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's exactly where I kind of wanted to steer the conversation. Is there's got to be a way for kids to get around this? It's sharing their phones and stuff.
I mean, could they
trying to
put their
fool
phones
the
in
other?
airplane mode?
That's the thing. It doesn't work if your phone is in airplane mode, but it's also just kind of like this is a very dystopian world that we have now, where it's like, oh, cool, this is what I have to do to not be tracked in school.
Right.
Like on the other end, like so a friend of mine is a teacher, And he was saying like I would actually prefer if they just didn't have phones at all, because it's such a distraction in class.
But
and
is that even a reality anymore? Like that's not even
no.
like,
but I mean,
really
like there's like concerts that do stuff like this, right? Or like comedy shows where like you put it in the bag and it's like locked, like for the remainder of the show.
I see. I would be cool with that too, but I just don't know if that's a reality that people.
It would definitely
accept,
be
right?
cheaper than these surveillance systems.
It would be.
So.
It would be. But yeah. What else do we got, Brian? These are good
this
questions.
is just really great conversation today. I'm glad that we brought this up because it's important to acknowledge that it doesn't seem to be malicious in intent, but it could easily construe that way. And I'm glad, Alfred, you have such a breadth of experience and perspective on this. I did want to point out that half the chat is devastated that Roger would skip school. And then another point being made is schools are very different these days. Eric says, Roger, things have changed since we were in school. Kids are a lot more locked down
that
a
is
lot
true.
tighter than we ever were. Even my generation, and I'm in between you guys.
I will totally cop to that. School was very different. It was much easier to leave my high school, my junior high, because it was fairly open. There were several points of entry now. Like I go back to that school now, and they've kind of locked it down. So it is. I will admit that it's a lot more difficult now, but kids can get around it.
Why were you back at your junior high?
Dude, I went to. I don't know. I just drive around my town. I can see the gates from the outside.
Yeah, we like when I was in high school, they didn't even let us like out for lunch. Like we couldn't go off campus for food.
See, we could. That's the thing.
Yeah,
it was fairly open. This was granted many years ago, so things have changed.
I could go off campus for lunch, and they took that away almost immediately after I graduated. So.
And I did. To be on the record, I didn't ditch school a lot until my senior year, and like I pretty much ditched the entire senior year. But at that point, like.
Yeah,
whatever damage was done, and so I was just leaving school every day.
Cutting class is cool, is basically what we're saying. That is the motto.
I am not saying it's cool.
Charge.
I'm not advocating we cut class, particularly now that I'm a parent. Don't skip school, kids.
Hashtag be like Roger.
I will say it happens, and so but I don't know the ease of which it can happen now and how kids are tracked.
Was it as easy as it was like? It was like super easy in college, but
college,
also like you pay for it.
Yeah,
You're
college like you don't. That's on you, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole different situation. With high school, I mean, it's easy because I had friends who worked in like the principal's office. Like they could write little notes excusing me out for like 3 periods. Mm-hmm. So I could just give out the note and be like, all right.
So you actually like try to get like a way out. I just cut. I didn't really care.
No. I did in a way where like my absences weren't marked.
Yeah.
So
but like in the way that I was talking about, where it's like they would, make like there's ways that kids can get around like machines. Even like when I mentioned like they made the bot calls to the house.
Yeah,
I would just go home and like
yeah.
Come back tomorrow when Roger teaches us all outmoded methods for skipping school.
Exactly. Like these are all methods that are probably completely irrelevant at this point.
What you got to do is you got to disconnect the ringer from your beeper so they can't get a hold.
I did have a beeper in high school, actually.
As did I.
So cool.
And a track phone. All right, moving on. We got some really good questions still to get to. Eric says, how many schools out there issue Chromebooks and iPads and other tablets and accoutrements? You think there isn't tracking on them? There's another good point.
Oh,
if they're
an insane amount. A very high amount of schools do this. Actually, I believe this is in Arizona, but I want to double check. It might be New Mexico. But there is a current lawsuit right now against Google for like the education stuff. Yeah, the attorney. New Mexico. The New Mexico Attorney General last week sued Google over the Chromebook for Education program, saying that
Google is collecting data from the Chromebooks?
on kids. Google has said that this is not true. Another shocker. Basically saying that like their data collection protocol is very different from their education program than it is for like the overall network of things. But there are things to be said though that like even if they are not collecting data on these Chromebook devices, I think the idea is still that like they have to make a Gmail account for that, right? You can't you can't use a Chromebook without a Google account. I mean, unless the school makes one for you. There's obviously all these steps that I might not be privy to, but I think the idea is still that like they're indoctrinating these kids to like into the Google Chromebook. Yeah, Google. I love working on Google Docs. Like how many people like ended up learning how to use like Microsoft Word or Excel, or like even put that on their resumes when they were like, like proficient in Microsoft Word, where it's like, yeah, you grew up thinking that was the only program that you could use to like as a text processor.
I still do that.
Yeah, that's my point though, is that that's kind of what Google is doing now with this education program, right? Like, obviously they're giving these Chromebooks to schools for pretty cheap. But at the same time, like, they're basically raising a crop of new customers and people that are only accustomed to their like OS for generations.
Sounds like Microsoft in the 90s.
Yeah.
Okay, with the very few minutes we have left, let's see if we can rapid fire through a couple of these. Storm King asks, is the information that is being sent over these signals available to be seen instead of location? Not exactly sure what that means.
What do you mean by information?
Storm King, if you want to elaborate on that, this sounds like there's a good question here, but we're having a little trouble deciphering.
Well, we will say that the wristband, which was that was kind of a really extreme version of it. Talk about that, because they boasted like you can get more data from that.
Yeah,
right?
so the wristbands are actually more precise than the radio frequency scanners. So the wristbands like can track it down to like 1 meter.
Right.
Which is like pretty close. And they also don't just collect, your location data. They're also getting things like your heart rate, your steps.
Yeah.
I don't even know how they do this, but your calorie consumption. Like,
interesting, because there's only a few that actually can do that right now. The technology is pretty new, so I don't know if I necessarily buy that one.
So that's like, none of that is data that you would need for safety, right? Like that's clearly marketing.
I feel like that's a company saying like, oh, it's safety plus it's also a health product or whatever. It's like this weird dual spin. I don't know if parents would necessarily buy that. And also, if I'm a parent, I don't know if I'm comfortable with the school just handing these things out to my kid. But I don't know. It's a weird situation because like having dealt with schools, like if a school rolled out this system as a parent, I don't know if I would necessarily know to say like, I don't want to be a part of this.
Yeah, but also like, let's say you didn't want to be a part of it, right? Are you going to move your kid to a different school?
That's the problem, right? You can't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, while we wait for Storm King to get back to us with specifics on the question regarding the information sent over the signals versus the location data, let's hard pivot into Mozilla real quick at the tail end of the show here. Yan says, has anyone tried the new Chromium-based Edge browser? Is that any good? Also, the Brave browser. I want to expand on that and say, Alfred, we've said that DNS protection is going to be coming default on Firefox. It's an opt-in option on Chrome. What about the other browsers out there? Are any of the rest of them going down this new and improved privacy path?
I mean, I don't know. Safari's already pretty secure with what it does, but they also don't have DNS over HTTPS.
I believe Brave supports it, but I don't know if it's default yet.
Yeah.
I imagine it will be, given like they're like the extreme privacy.
Yeah, you're like
browser.
you're pretty secure on Brave or private on Brave.
In terms
both.
of Edge, I haven't tried Edge. That's Microsoft's browser.
Yeah.
That would be a great question for Stephen Shanklin, who wrote this story. But I don't know if you've had experience with Edge or
no.
Yeah.
I mean, the same way that I was talking about like kids being indoctrinated to use Google all the time. Like I'm pretty like as a privacy and security reporter.
Explorer?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Like before
when you were younger,
before Mozilla was out, like before Firefox was out.
What about Netscape?
Yeah, I also use Netscape.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I don't really see Edge really being using this that much, but yeah, I don't know.
Also, I don't know. Like, I don't think either of us know, because I've only used Edge once.
But here's the thing: is that like a lot of this stuff like moves in like waves, right? So like HTTPS was not the default like on the internet for a while.
Yes.
Like it took like maybe 10 years for everything to be like HTTPS by default. It got to the point where like before, like if you were using Chrome at least, where like if it wasn't HTTPS, it would tell you like not secure, and then if it was HTTPS, it would have the green lock saying it is secure, right? Now it just when it is HTTPS, it shows nothing because it's like that's the default. That's how it should be. Yep. And then only when you're on a non-HTTPS website, it's like, hey, this is not secure. And I think like something like 80 to 85% of the internet is like on HTTPS now.
Okay, but like you said, it took a
really long time. So like that's kind of where I see the DNS thing going. Like it's gonna be a very like behind the scenes shift, and eventually like I think most browsers will have it on by default. But I honestly by that time like most advertisers will have figured out many different other ways to target you.
Right.
All right, this has been a really excellent conversation today. I actually hope that this, well, I guess I kind of hope it doesn't come up again, but it certainly will, because
it will.
They're going to invade our privacy until there's no more privacy to invade. Either way, thanks everybody for your contributions today. If you're a parent out there, we'd like to hear more from you. Expand on this, especially if perhaps you're in a situation where you use a private school and something like this or similar has already been implemented. Has that been a souring experience to you? How has the school handled it? How would you feel in general about this? Would it deter your application to a given school for your child or not? What is the cutoff line for you? Keep the conversation going, and until then, we'll see you tomorrow. And Roger, take us home.
Yeah, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, and as always, if you want to learn more, there are links to all of today's stories in the description below. Plus, the show is also available as an audio podcast. Links to subscribe to that are in the description as well. For the Daily Charge, I'm Roger Chang.
I'm Alfred Ng.
Thanks for joining us. Or listening to us. Either way, it's cool.
Can't get enough? Check out the Daily Supercharge, our extended post show with special features, audience Q&A, and in-depth reviews. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.